So I don't really want to get into value of memorabilia at this point. Which club memorabilia from one club is more valuable than another. Again, it really depends on the player. This is player specific, unless it's a team signed shirt from a particular event that was notable, a European Cup final, something like that, a Copa Libertadores final. We really want to look at the history of the game and the setup in this particular podcast. And now we're going to talk about some of the super clubs, the UEFA Champions League and the English Premier League. So the super clubs are the big clubs that are the wealthiest clubs, but also have the best players and tend to be the strongest teams. So among these are the teams that are in the Champions League. So your Real Madrids, your Barcelonas, your PSGs, your Juventus, AC Milan, Chelsea and Manchester City. These are the super clubs. They have a lot of money. And the reason why they have a lot of money is because of past successes and also the Champions League. The Champions League has a lot of money. It's produced a lot of money for these clubs from TV revenue. People around the world watch the Champions League. The Champions League final from this past year brought 500 million viewers, and on average, that's what it brings in every final every year. So that's a lot of people watching. It's certainly more than the Super Bowl, 120 million viewers. And in America, we like to think, oh, everyone watches the Super Bowl around the world, but that's not necessarily true. Yes, there's a global audience, but the Champions League final dwarfs the Super Bowl. So here we can take a look at the Champions League. What is the Champions League? Well, for those of you who are new to the sport, the Champions League, they're the top clubs in Europe. Every country in Europe, every country around the world has a domestic league, and in some cases a domestic league system. So you have a number of leagues, and you have a top flight, and then you have lower leagues all the leagues are independent for the most part, and then you have a top flight league, which is the best league. And you might have 20 teams in that league, you might have 22, you might have 18. And the top teams in those leagues, in England it's the top 4 teams. The top teams in those leagues in Europe play in the Champions League, and it's the top teams at the end of each season. So the Champions League is a very important league, and the Champions League starts in July and it ends at the end of May. In some cases, I think they were talking about ending in June. I think sometimes that might happen. So they play a lot of games. Players play a lot of games, and the Champions League is very important. It's very popular. The next league that we're looking at now, we're going to be looking at a domestic league, and the next most important league in the world, because the Champions League is the most watched professional league. The next most important professional league, domestic league that is the English Premier League. And the English Premier League is very popular, especially here in the States. For one thing, there's a lot of drama in the league. The style of play is very fast. So they speak in English, and Americans can widely understand the commentary. So it doesn't take a whole lot to sell and package the Premier League to an American audience. The quality is there, but also it's a very interesting product, if you could call it a product. I don't like when marketers and business people call sports a product, let alone an academy player is called a product. But that's a whole other thing. I'll get into it another time. But a lot of people watch the games here, and the games are televised in such a way that the Premier League is not really competing with any other American sport. You can watch a game at 7:30 in the morning, and there's nothing else on. If you want to get up early in the morning, it's a great thing. I can get up in the morning and watch a game and start my day. And guys, you can go down to your man cave and watch the game, get up, and then you have the rest of your day. It doesn't kill the day. Even if a game is on at noontime, you could do what you need to in the morning, come back, watch a game at noon, and do what you need to do for the rest of the day. Here to the right, we see the super clubs and sort of how they're valued. They are among the most valuable professional teams in the world, and they're on par with the American sports teams. I use the Yankees and the Cowboys as examples. These clubs are worth around $4 billion So you can say, well, that's a lot of money, or that isn't a lot of money, but how it works in terms of the general scheme of things. There's a lot of money in TV money in the sport. There's a lot of shirt deals. There's a lot of endorsements from players. Player transfer fees are very high. So it all kind of sits that way because of the way everything is set up. And now let's look at international football, international soccer, and this is what tends to get the most amount of attention in the United States is the World Cup. Every 4 years the World Cup comes around. The United States is usually in it. This particular World Cup in 2018, the United States did not qualify, so the interest was less than in previous years, and that's understandable. So we take a look at the FIFA World Cup, and this is the most watched sporting event in the world, more than the Olympics, more than anything else. The final for the 2018 World Cup was viewed by 3.2 billion viewers around the world. That's a lot of people. And so it's very, very popular. There's so much drama involved in the sport. And in America, it's very popular as well. But from a collecting standpoint, from a memorabilia standpoint, it's when the market is flooded with shirts, with new shirts. Nearly 50 million shirts, World Cup shirts, are produced every 4 years, and this year was 50 million, 2018. 22 million of those were produced by Adidas. So you can see just the sheer volume of shirts that are entering into the market. Most of these will be held onto, but people might try to resell these shirts. They might try to get these shirts autographed. So you can see that there can be a lot of shirts out there that are signed on the marketplace on eBay. You can see how thousands of shirts get there. So the World Cup is a big part of that. International football is a big part of that. The thing about international football shirts is that they tend to be held on to collectors a little bit longer than club shirts or professional shirts. Club shirts, professional shirts are produced every year, and every June they come out with the new shirts. Every July in Europe, for example, every June I think it is, and they come out. A professional club may come out with 3 or 4 shirts. In some cases, 5 shirts. You have a home and away, and then you have alternate shirts as well. And then the next year they come out with them again as well. So although there are a lot more club shirts and produced a lot more frequently, the international shirts, they're produced I think on a bigger scale. So you can see the differences between the two types of shirts: an international football shirt and a club shirt. So America loves the World Cup. At least a growing number of Americans love the World Cup. Not everybody, certainly. The World Cup is very important to soccer in this country. It spurs a lot of discussion about the sport. It's on the airwaves, and it also means a lot to collectors of memorabilia as well, to U.S. fans, the U.S. team. And there are 2 World Cups as well. There's the Men's World Cup and the Women's World Cup. We're going to focus primarily on the Men's World Cup right now. I want to get into women's football in the next slide or two and talk about the reason why it's not valued as highly as memorabilia from the men's game, and there are reasons for that I'll get into as well. But primarily we're going to look at the Men's World Cup, the U.S. men's team, and you can see the numbers there. 26 million viewers for the final between Germany and Argentina in 2014, and for the men, when the U.S. played Portugal in that opening round matchup, 25 million total viewers. These are viewers that are online, viewers on cable, viewers who are streaming it, on different devices. So it's important to just realize that the game is growing, and more Americans are following the sport. There used to be a stigma to the sport among the general American sports public. That's slowly being chipped away. It's still there. And in many ways, if you watch SportsCenter, ESPN, you can certainly see when they mispronounce a name and, Well, today Tottenham Hotspurs played the what's this team, Jimmy? I can't even pronounce it. Heck, they played today. You can see it. Sometimes they refer to the sport in a derogatory manner. That's to be expected. They're sort of playing to the crowd a little bit, to people that are turning on SportsCenter to watch American football or other sports. But that's slowly changing as more and more people watch the sport. The women's game, we're going to be talking about the women's game in a little bit. The women's game was also very popular, and when the Women's World Cup will be happening this upcoming year. It's New Year's Eve right now, and in 2019 we're going to have the Women's World Cup, and that should be great. It should be great to follow. And the Women's World Cup, when the women won the World Cup in 1999, when the women's team hosted the World Cup, they had 90,000 attendees for the final at the Rose Bowl. And I think there were 22 million viewers on television to watch the women's team, and that was a record for a while for an American soccer sporting event in which Americans were participating in it. So fantastic, and we'll talk about the women's team in the next slide.